happened in early October of 2019, just outside a small town in Iowa, where my cousin's family owns a big stretch of farmland. Every fall, they turn a portion of their land into a corn maze for the town's fall festival, something families for miles around came to visit. That year, they were short on help, so they asked me to come down and work for a few weeks. I figured it'd be a nice break. Crisp air, pumpkin patches, cider. But the cornfield had its own personality. On my second night there, I volunteered to close up the maze. The last group of kids had just left, their laughter echoing down the dirt road. It was 9:30 p.m. The fog was setting in, and the only light came from a flickering lantern tied to the post near the entrance. I started walking through, checking the paths, making sure no one was still inside. The corn was tall, over 7 feet, and when the wind blew, it sounded like whispers. That's when I noticed it. One of the scarecrows was in the wrong place. We had 3 scarecrows, one at each major corner. But there was another one now, standing dead center in one of the side paths. I figured maybe the owner's son had moved it earlier for decoration, so I went closer to fix its position. The thing was, it looked off. It wasn't propped on a post like the others. It was just standing there, and it was breathing. I froze. My flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, the scarecrow's head had tilted toward me. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Then it started walking. Not fast, just slow, unsteady steps, its boots crunching through the dirt. I turned and ran, tripping over the corn roots as I sprinted for the maze exit. I didn't stop until I saw the lantern again. When I turned back, the figure was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just wind. I didn't tell anyone that night. I didn't want to sound insane. But the next morning, when the owner came by to check the field, one of the real scarecrows was missing. The post was snapped in half. We assumed it was teenagers messing around until that night. I was inside the small wooden shed by the entrance, counting tickets, when I heard footsteps outside, slow, crunching through gravel. Thinking it was one of the workers, I peeked out the window. But no one was there, and something dragged across the door, like a hand, or maybe burlap, then a low chuckle. I stepped back. The door creaked open just an inch, enough for the cold air to slip in. When I looked down, there were muddy boot prints leading up to the shed, and they stopped right at the door. But here's the thing, the prints were bare halfway through, like someone had started walking barefoot, then disappeared. The next morning, one of the kids who helped in the maze told us he saw a man in a sack mask standing at the edge of the field at 3 a.m. No one believed him, until he described exactly what I'd seen. The local sheriff drove out to investigate, but found nothing. The only thing he mentioned was that 30 years ago, a farmhand went missing in those same fields. They found his jacket, some boots, and the remains of a makeshift scarecrow post with dried blood on the base. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. The maze paths would change overnight. Twisted, dead ends appearing where none existed before. We even found fresh footprints inside the maze one morning. But there had been a heavy storm the night before, and the ground should have been washed clean. I decided I was done. I told my cousin I'd help through the weekend, then head home. That final night, the town had a big Halloween event. Hundreds of people filled the maze. Kids laughing, flashlights bouncing everywhere, music playing from speakers. It was loud until it wasn't. The power went out. Panic set in. Parents called for their kids, flashlights darting like fireflies. In the chaos, I heard someone scream deep inside the maze. I ran in with my flashlight, heart pounding. That's when I saw him again, standing perfectly still in the center of the maze. That same figure, burlap mask, dark eyes staring through me. I yelled at him to stop, thinking it was a prankster. But then he lifted something from the ground. It was one of the missing scarecrow heads, the old burlap one, with straw still poking out the neck. He dropped it. Then he tilted his head at me again and vanished into the corn. We shut down the maze early that night. The sheriff came again. No footprints, no evidence. But when we went to the center path, the one where I'd seen the man, there was a fresh scarecrow post jammed into the dirt, and tied to it was a brand new burlap sack, still wet. I quit the next morning. It's been years since that October, but every fall, when the air gets cold and the corn turns yellow, I can still hear the sound of footsteps crunching through the field behind my house. And sometimes, when I look out at the tree line, I swear I see him, still standing there, still watching, based on a true October story. I grew up in a small suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania, the kind where every October looked like it was straight out of a postcard. Orange leaves, pumpkins on porches, kids running around with plastic swords, and fairy wings. In 2017, I was 24, newly married, and my wife and I had just moved into our first home, a cozy two-story at the end of Ridgeway Lane. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The house next door, though, was different. It had been empty for as long as anyone could remember. Our realtor told us the owner was an older man who passed away years ago. No family left. The place was stuck in legal limbo. Every Halloween, neighborhood kids dared each other to knock on the front door or peek through the dusty windows. No one ever lasted more than a few seconds. They said you could hear someone walking upstairs, even though the house was empty. That October, my wife wanted to go all out for Halloween. We decorated our yard with fake gravestones, orange lights, and even built a small fog machine. The night before Halloween, I went outside to test the fog setup. While I was adjusting the lights, I looked over at the abandoned house. One of the windows on the second floor, the one that had always been boarded up, now had a light on. I stared for a good minute. It wasn't flickering like a candle. It was steady like an old lamp. I told myself maybe some city worker was checking the property, but deep down, something about it felt wrong. The next evening, Halloween night, the whole street came alive. Kids in costumes darted between houses. Parents followed with flashlights, and laughter echoed off the cool air. We must have handed out 200 pieces of candy. Around 10 p.m., the crowd started thinning. I was packing up decorations when I noticed a little boy, maybe 7 years old, standing near the driveway of the abandoned house. He wasn't in costume, just a striped shirt, jeans, and bare feet. I called out, "Hey buddy, you lost?" He didn't answer. He just tilted his head a little, then turned and walked straight up to the front door of that house. I dropped what I was doing and jogged over. The kid pushed the door open like it was unlocked. When I got there, he was gone. The front door creaked on its hinges. The inside was pitch black. I called into the dark, "Hello? Kid, you okay in there?" Nothing. That's when the upstairs light came on again. I backed up to the street and called my wife to bring my phone so I could call the cops. When she came out, she pointed at the house and froze. "Who's that in the window?" she whispered. In the second-story window, the one with the light, there was a figure tall, thin, and unmoving. It wasn't a kid. It looked like a man, standing perfectly still, head turned toward us. I blinked and the light went out. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the house top to bottom. No kid, no man, but one of the officers came back pale-faced and asked if we'd been inside recently. We said no. He told us the upstairs floorboards were so rotten that no one should have been able to walk up there without falling through. They also found small, wet footprints on the hardwood floor, child-sized, leading from the front door to the base of the staircase. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went over when the sun came up, trying to convince myself it had just been a trick of the light. But there, on the porch railing, was something new. A candy bucket, orange, with a smiling pumpkin face. Inside were 3 pieces of candy corn and one tiny muddy handprint smeared on the rim. That night, I barely slept. Every time the house creaked, I looked out the window. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of knocking. Not on my door, but on the wall we share with the abandoned house next door. 3 knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. It sounded hollow, like it was coming from the inside of the wall. I went outside, half expecting to see someone hiding in the shadows. The street was empty, except for a faint flicker in that same upstairs window again, the one that should have been sealed shut. and for a split second, I saw the boy. He was standing behind the glass, holding the candy bucket, face completely expressionless. Then the curtain dropped. 2 days later, a construction crew arrived to start demolishing the property, finally sold to a development company. My wife and I stood on our porch, watching as the excavator clawed through the rotted walls. When they hit the upstairs floor, one of the workers shouted. Inside the far corner of the second floor, behind the wall, they found a small space, a hidden crawl area. Inside it were old toys, a broken tricycle, and a child's skeleton. Tiny, barefoot. The coroner said the remains were decades old, probably from the late 1970s. No one ever figured out who the child was or what happened to him. But here's the part that still chills me. The demolition team tore the house down completely by November. By December, the lot was empty, just dirt and a few bricks. Yet for months afterward, people walking their dogs at night said they could still see a light flicker where the upstairs window used to be. Some said they even heard faint knocking, 3 times, then 3 again, from somewhere underground. I moved out the following spring. We live 3 towns over now. Every Halloween, I still leave a small candy bucket on my porch, orange, with 3 candy corns inside, just in case he's still looking for home. The Halloween house that should have stayed empty. In October of 2020, I went camping with 3 of my friends, all of us in our mid-20s, at a remote spot in northern Oregon, right on the edge of a forest called Elkhorn Hollow. We've been going there every fall since college. Our little tradition. A weekend with no cell service, no traffic, just the sound of wind in the trees and a crackling fire. But that year, something about the woods felt different. Like the silence itself was alive. We set up camp next to an old riverbed, surrounded by thick trees. The air was sharp, the kind that smells like pine and smoke. As the sun went down, we started our fire and made dinner. My friend Jake joked that it was perfect serial killer weather, that kind of dark humor that feels funny until the forest goes completely quiet after. And it did. All the crickets and rustling just stopped. Around midnight, we were sitting around telling ghost stories when we heard it, a faint whistling. It wasn't coming from any of us. It was distant, somewhere beyond the trees. A slow, steady tune, just 4 notes over and over. Jake yelled out, "Hey, someone else camping out here." But no answer. The whistling stopped and then started again, closer this time. We laughed it off at first, trying to play it cool, but I could tell everyone was uneasy. Eventually, we put out the fire and zipped into our tents. I remember lying there, half asleep, listening to the wind, until I realized I was hearing footsteps. Soft, slow, circling the campsite. Crunch, pause, crunch, and then that whistling again, only this time it was right outside my tent. I froze. My friends must have heard it too, because I heard someone unzip their tent and whisper, "Who's out there?" Silence. Then, clear as day, a deep voice answered from the dark, just passing through. The voice was calm. Male. Too calm. We shined our flashlights into the trees, but there was no one. The voice had come from just beyond the fire pit, maybe 10 feet away. Jake grabbed his hunting knife and whispered that he was going to check the trail. I told him not to, but he went anyway, flashlight in hand. We waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, from deep in the woods, came the sound of screaming. It was Jake, yelling our names, then the sound cut off mid-scream. We all ran toward the sound, flashlights bouncing, calling his name. After about 50 yards, we found his flashlight lying in the dirt, still on, but no Jake. Just his knife, stuck blade first into the ground. We shouted until our throats hurt, but the only thing that answered was that same 4-note whistle, drifting through the dark. We ran back to camp, threw what we could into the truck, and sped down the dirt road without even looking back. We called the local sheriff as soon as we got service. They organized a search party the next morning, dogs, rangers, everything. They found Jake 2 days later. He was alive, barely, He'd been found lying face down near the old ranger station 5 miles from camp. No memory of what happened, just deep scratches on his back like someone had dragged him through the brush. When the sheriff asked if he'd seen anyone, Jake said one thing before blacking out. "He wore my face." The sheriff wrote it off as trauma, said maybe he fell or got lost. But 2 weeks later, they closed off the entire area of Elkhorn Hollow. Apparently, several other campers had gone missing in that same region over the past decade. Locals said the forest was cursed, something about a hermit who lived there in the 1960s, known for making human masks out of animal hides. But the detail that still makes my skin crawl: when they towed our truck back from the campsite, the rangers noticed muddy handprints all over the driver's side door, too large to be human. And on the windshield, written in the fog, were 4 words: "Still passing through, friend." That was the last time I ever went camping. Every October since, I hear that same 4-note whistle in my dreams. And sometimes when I drive late at night through the Oregon backroads, I swear I see a figure on the side of the road, wearing a face that looks almost like Jake's. The October Campground Incident, based on true reports from Elkhorn Hollow, Oregon. If this story kept you looking over your shoulder, imagine what's still out there waiting to be told. Which October story chilled you the most? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you love true horror as much as I do, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a night of terror. Because every October, something new wakes up